resources
Sure.
that do try to assist people that have the brain injury, the acquired brain injuries, but it's like their family just drops them. They don't
Yes.
know how to take care of them anymore. They don't know how to help them. So they go to residential homes, and then like that becomes their life. Like, elderly people going, or someone going into a skilled nursing facility and then you're forgot about. So they're kind of like in that same situation. So I want to implement something where family support, like bigger knowledge and psychoeducation for the family, to how they can support their family member post brain injury.
Yes. Okay. Well, then I would not really include anything around burnout in that case. I would sort of narrowly focus on family, because sometimes students in this process get a little bit held back by thinking about, like, how am I going to fix everything for everybody? And then the problem becomes with thinking about the logic model, and then eventually the program evaluation is we want to think very narrowly around one service or one program to be implemented. So, Sharita, it sounds like you're saying that the program could really be like a psychosocial support program for family members.
Mhm.
Then I would really focus there for like family members of patients who are coping with traumatic brain injury. And then I would actually, my recommendation for this logic model, thinking about the path of least resistance, the easiest amount of work for students, is to actually do some Google searching or some internet literature searches and
Mhm.
say, are there programs like this out there already in existence? Like, has somebody developed family support programs for patients with traumatic brain injury, or maybe dementia, or maybe something similar?
Okay.
And there might already be a program involved. And from there, you can look at, well, what resources are involved? Who implements the program? What kind of activities? There might already be, modules created, or work written about this topic. And then I would really take that and, like, of course, cite it and everything, but say, there's a program out there that actually has some evidence based around it. I just want to take that program and implement it at my practicum or at my work site or something. And that will really like break down all the tools
Mhm.
that you really need to look at. Then the I'll share my screen again. The logic model and say, okay, well, like, what do I need for this? I need staff on board. I might need volunteers, time, money, research materials, equipment, technology partners. Actually, all of these would work for your Sharita. And then, like, you would just take that, just to copy and paste that part. And then thinking about, well, what do we do? How do we actually implement a program for families? And then that could be, conducting X amount of workshops. And hopefully, if you find a program like this out there in the world, they might have, like, we do an 8-week training program with families.
Mhm.
Or we might also offer services related to when coming in and visiting a family member. What services can we offer families? Let's say respite care for other children or something like that, or childcare, or some incentive to visit families. I don't know what that could be. Developing products often is, well, what kind of materials do we need to support families educationally? Like, what kind of manuals should we offer them? What kind of pamphlets? What kind of maybe online modules should they go through? Oh, wait, we have another person coming in. I think Sarah, are you here? Oh, she's still connecting. Hi, Sarah, welcome. We're just sort of going through, um, Sharita has given us an example of her logic model topic, and we're just kind of going through workshopping it to see how this could maybe fit along this template.
Okay.
So yeah, we're doing good. So if you think about like developing products, materials, And this kind of goes along with some of my feedback for you all in terms of outputs. You want to think of outputs as something being materially focused. So long after you leave the program, let's say you just come in as an implementation specialist or an evaluation specialist, what can you leave behind that the next person can pick up and say, oh, I know how to implement this because I have all these amazing materials from Sharita. So thinking about like what products can be developed so it can be long lasting. So again, maybe you're offering training, counseling, facilitation groups, marketing for the new program using media. And then who are we reaching? For your Sharita, it might be focusing like on the family members, but you're also reaching the participants, the people that are living with traumatic brain injuries. You might want to market this service to other agencies. You might want to advocate for funding with decision makers. And then lastly, you're thinking about like the outcomes, right? So I work a lot in gerontology, and some of the things that we look at in terms of like residential or institutionalized care is like agitation behaviors, so and medication use. So potentially by further engagement in families, you can reduce agitation behaviors, maybe reduce medication usage for depression or anxiety. You might be increasing family engagement. So you're really looking at like, what do we want to decrease? This is just a basic example. We want to decrease anxiety and depression amongst patients with traumatic brain injury living in residential care. We want to increase family engagement. We want to maybe increase family satisfaction with services. We want to increase visitations. We want to increase family cohesion and connectiveness. And then long term, like I might focus more on like the social and environmental conditions of the community. Like if we implement this program, we are long-term creating like a better network of services, maybe expanding this program to other agencies that have residential care for traumatic brain injury, those sorts of things. So I think that's really like social and environmental change.
Okay.
But the key is really like narrowing down to saying, I'm offering one program, one service. How do I really work that through the actions related to the logic model to lead to an increase in the community amongst, desirable outcomes, decreasing undesirable outcomes? Hopefully that helps, Sharita. And I don't want to leave out Sarah and Lindsay, because we can also go through your ideas. But Sharita, do you have any other questions about your logic model? Because I don't want to also switch topics really quickly either.
Oh, no, that's perfect. I took some good notes. So no, that was great. Thank you so much for
Thank you,
explaining that
Sharita.
and kind of going in depth. Yep. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, I would say keep it really streamlined. Just remember, this is for everybody. This is not a long paper. This is a 4-page paper. One of those pages is the logic model. So it's really a 3-page paper. So really what you're working with, you're not writing a lot. You're just working on kind of the conceptualization of this. Okay, perfect. So Lindsay and Sarah, who would like to go next?
So I'm not in a place where I can have my camera on, but
Okay.
I did kind of want to, kind of talk through mine.
Sure.
Because I used like my place of employment. So after doing like the need survey, one of the biggest things they talked about was, understaffing and, maybe having a bit more like real world experience, because a lot of people are kind of new to doing like job coaching and they may not know. And then, some of the people who have been there a while, may be leaving. So one of the things I thought about was just kind of creating like a more, stable training curriculum.
Mhm.
So if going through the logic model, like, would the input be the staff, or would the input be like, I don't know, I guess I'm kind of stuck on
Yeah,
making
no,
sure I
that's fine.
differentiate those two.
No, that makes sense. And this is why I really like this particular template. Like you can use any template that you want, but I think this one's really clear cut in the sense of like, where do things go? Because sometimes students like find that there's overlap between. So when you think about inputs, what you want to think is, so let's say, and Sarah, I'm trying to remember your needs assessment. I've graded like 40 of these in the past week. So I'm like, was yours around workforce support for people supporting people with disabilities in the
Yeah.
workforce? Yes. Okay, I
Mhm.
remember this. So um what I was thinking of based on your needs assessment is
Mhm.
that, and I work on some program evaluation in the area of workforce support for child welfare workers and with the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indian. So I'm kind of, it was sort of ringing true what you were talking about in terms of what we're finding in Cherokee, is that there was a real need based on our needs assessment for a new employee onboarding. And a
Mhm.
part of that was integrated into the culture of the organization. But also there was a real need for like a realistic job preview. So
Mhm.
what we found is that people did not entirely know what they were getting into in terms of child welfare. And so like were very shocked once they got out into the field, because the tribe doesn't just hire social workers, like they hire mainly enrolled members and then kind of onboard them to social work along the way. So it reminded me a little bit of what you were talking about, is like the high turnover, the high burnout, the lack of resources, the lack of preparedness. So were you
Mhm.
thinking of something like a new employee onboarding manual as like your specific program, or a new employee training program?
I think so. And that's why I don't know how to, I guess, streamline it, because as I had to pull up I'm on my phone, so I had to pull up my logic model on my computer. But basically, like, the, I have like the human resource boarding, and then I have like staff and recruiters, and then like, um, maybe also trying to recruit or let people kind of know about the job. But I wasn't sure, like, if I'm kind of spacing out too much, which I just focus on having the new onboarding, the new like training curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so yeah, I'm just kind of, I don't know, I don't quite get the inputs and activities and the outputs. So that's
Yes. I mean, I think the first thing is you really do have to narrow in on like what program or service, like just choosing one new offering. And so
okay.
if it's recruiting new employees
Hmm.
for positions, I would
Hmm.
say that might be limited in terms of the literature to kind of support, because often that's like in a different realm other than social work. Often that's like HR marketing,
Okay.
other realm. But I do
Okay.
think, not to try to push you too hard in this direction, but like a new employee training program might
Hmm.
help with retention of
Hmm.
workers over time, because the
Okay.
literature, there's a really strong literature base that can
Okay.
support that. So let's just go with that for now,
All
just
right.
to
All
show
right.
you like the way the logical model operates. So if we were thinking about new employee onboarding slash training, you
Hmm.
would need to invest in obviously staff,
Hmm.
time. I don't think you need volunteers, but
Hmm.
time, money. I would say research base,
Hmm.
materials in the form of onboarding materials, manuals, training modules,
Hmm.
probably technology and partners for that,
Hmm.
because you might want to do some online training, for example, that's, or you might want to record some videos about onboarding or the participant population, or maybe like a realistic job preview with maybe a social worker working with a client or a model client, for example.
Hmm.
In terms of outputs, you'd really want to think about, okay, So your inputs are all the resources you need to implement the program. The
Mhm.
outputs are, okay, what is kind of the action that we need to make this program happen, to implement the program? And that could be, conducting, a 6 weeks of modules, maybe one per week. Maybe having meetings to orient the entire organization about the new onboarding.
Mhm.
You might have to develop products, the curriculum for onboarding resources. You're going to actually have to, probably the majority of your activity is going to come from actually training new staff.
Mhm.
Working with facilitators to train new staff, maybe partnering with media to promote the onboarding program. That might
Mhm.
also draw new employees in.
Mhm.
And then you want to think about like, who will we reach? So
Okay.
for yours, it's really like, okay, we're reaching new employees, but we're
Mhm.
also reaching clients and families in this process as well,
Mhm.
because you're also thinking about, well, if we improve onboarding, we're probably going to improve services for clients as well, because they're not going to get this new employee assigned to their case and who doesn't know what they're doing. There's no
Right.
direction.
Mhm.
And hopefully, that will lead to greater satisfaction, more consumers of services, etc.
Mhm.
Then lastly, we went through this a little bit with Sharita's. You want to think about short-term and long-term impacts. So you want to think about, well, by virtue of having this new employee onboarding, in the short term, what's going to change? So there's going to be maybe a increase in learning. So you want to think about this in terms of increases and decreases. So we want to increase desired outcomes, decrease undesired outcomes. So we
Mhm.
obviously want to decrease things like burnout, turnover, etc. But
Mhm.
then we want to increase maybe learning, knowledge about the job, maybe
Mhm.
positive attitudes about the job,
Mhm.
increasing skills, motivation to come to work, motivation to work with clients, etc. And then you want to think about the ultimate impact. So the way I try to think about long-term outcomes are like, what is going to impact the community in years to come?
Mm.
So how are we going to change social, economic, civic, and environmental conditions? So for yours, like there's an improvement in economic conditions. If people living with disabilities are employed in the community, they will economically benefit from that.
Mm.
So you want
Yeah.
to think about like your program being the pebble and then the long-term impacts being like the ripple. Like, how do we live in a better community where
Mhm.
everyone's boat kind of rises in a more equitable way based on the impact? So that could also be people living with disabilities feel more support from their community. Maybe you get more employers educated on what it truly means to support people living with disabilities in the workplace, or you get more employers on board learning about how hiring people with disabilities actually betters their business,
Mm.
and the
Mhm.
unique talents people bring to the table. And
Mhm.
then you can also focus on long-term impacts for your workforce.
Mhm.
So if people are onboarded better, like the literature does show that people stay in the job longer.
Mhm.
That could also increase people's economic opportunities, abilities to get promoted at work, ability to experience wellness at work. So you want to
Mhm.
think about like the short term, long term.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense and it feels a lot better. So yeah, I think my problem was I was like kind of thinking like several things. But
Yes.
I do think kind of honing in because that was a stated need. Just honing in on that particular one is, I can kind of go through it, the different aspects of it and understand it a little bit better.
Okay, good. Yes. And I think just sort of walking through, and that was my main item of feedback looking at everyone's needs assessments, is that you all uncovered so many needs that in section 5, was when you're really supposed to outline, okay, what program or service am I now going to offer based on these needs? Everyone's was like very elusive, or many people, not everyone's, was very elusive. Like, I covered all these needs. We might be able to implement that. We might be able to implement that to improve that need. And then my main feedback was like, okay, just choose one. Here are your options, but choose one narrowly moving forward, because we need that one for the logic model. We need that one program or one service, and then we use that same program or service for our program evaluation, which is our final assignment for the course.
Okay.
Okay, good, Sarah. Okay, I want to get to Lindsay too, because I know, Lindsay, you've been on the line for a while too. Is this helping at all, and how can we help you with yours?
Yeah, I feel that it is helping. The only unfortunate part is my practicum site that I'm doing my stuff on is so well put together. so, so I've tried to like look at ways that, things that may need to be addressed and stuff, but there's always some contingency to back up those things that, we discuss here. So it's been difficult trying to find areas of need.
Yes. Well, and I'm wondering as well, so when talking to your supervisor or being in supervision about kind of the focus of this, you can also think about it in you're really imagining at this point, because the needs assessment is the only assignment in this class where you're actually gathering data. From this point out, you're really just proposing ideas. So you might even ask your supervisor, like, in an ideal world, if resources were like of no object, even though this is already a very well-run service with so many resources and support for our clients, like, what is one thing, if money were no object and time were no object and staff were no object, that we could implement in the form of a service or a program to better support any constituency related to the agency? It could be workers, it could be your clients, it could be administrative. Do you think that could help like narrow it a little bit? Because Lindsay, remind me of where your practicum site is again.
It's the Montgomery County Veterans Treatment Court.
Oh yeah, that was so cool to read about.
Yeah, it's a very well put together program. If we're proposing an idea like that, then I think the only beneficial thing here would be more caseworkers, because we're about to be servicing over 100 people and there's only 3 case managers.
Oh wow, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So also, one of the cool programs that I've learned about to benefit case managers, I was in this whole like national evaluation, and every different site did a different implementation project related to workforce development for social workers. One site did what's called a job redesign, and it was to manage exactly what you're talking about, like an influx of clients. This was particularly in child welfare. But their job redesign, and this could be a program, Lindsay, you could even look up in terms of like an evidence-based practice, like job redesign for child welfare workers, because I think this could actually cross over any like agency that like has caseloads or case management or like a large influx of clients. What they did is they were basically dealing with huge caseloads and not many workers. So they were like, how do we actually redesign our job to meet the needs of this huge influx of clients? Because there's no way to replicate 3 people. So what they did is they basically kind of like split their workforce up a little bit, and they took a third, I believe, of the child welfare workers and had them work like specifically on all the administrative stuff, because they were basically like, not one case manager can actually work this 100 cases from beginning to end. So, and people are getting burned out and tired, high turnover rate. So they were like, well, how do we actually carve out a part of our workforce to work on this one specific thing, all the clerical, all the administrative paperwork, so that our case managers could just like work with clients and make sure that they get the services they need, or they work with family reunification or other things. So that was one way they figured out, like, how do we redesign this? How do we reimagine this? You could do something similar. It also sounds like you're going to need to like hire people regardless, because if you do a redesign with like 3 workers and 100 clients, it's going to be like, one person's out. So like
Yeah.
two,
Well, the beneficial thing with it too, though, is because it's phases within the program. Even though there's 89 clients right now with a possible 23 coming in, not all 89 of them are in the same phase, which means their case management could be spread out to where they're only coming in once a month. So
yeah,
that minimizes how much interaction they're having with that person, unless something arises that needs to be discussed. So that's kind of how it does balance out, because
yes,
there's only you know per caseworker maybe 12 to 15 coming in weekly,
yeah,
while others may be coming in every other week or only once a month based on which phase they're in.
yes. Okay. Yeah, that does change things, because you're not seeing clients in an
Yeah, you're not
intensive
seeing
way.
30 clients every week. You're only seeing a quarter of that, probably, or half,
Yeah.
until they progress through the phases.
Yeah. How about are there any needs related to your client population that you can see, if you sort of disentangle this from like the workforce, and then say, okay, well, we're missing this like very key thing that might be leading
I,
to recidivism or something.
I would say no, because we do have the partnerships for those that are veterans on the civilian side. We have local jobs that will hire or find them a job. And then some of the other population is active duty, so they still have a job. And then we've got the VA on board because we're dealing with veterans. So we have people with the VA that come to court every week who help those that need benefits or need care at the VA or need mental health care at the VA, different things like that.
Mm,
They cover cost if you don't have insurance. The treatment court will cover costs for if you're required to do inpatient and or outpatient therapy. Like, as I'm saying, there's so many different layers that cover. The only thing I could really think of was dealing with current risk assessments that we use. We only have one, and really it doesn't gear towards the population that it's the 10 RAS, so it kind of deals with, or the higher risk assessment is what we use. It doesn't quite gear towards necessarily the veteran and or active duty population, because
mm,
it'll talk a lot about you know prior convictions and things like that. And some of these people don't ever have a prior arrest. The only thing they have is a DUI. So it
mhm,
doesn't necessarily gear towards creating if they are high risk or low risk, because 90% of the time they come out low risk,
mm,
and doesn't necessarily correlate with them actually being high risk because they had, a 0.30, DUI, which is pretty high.
mhm,
So that's the only thing I can kind of think of,
mhm,
is utilizing different assessments to really
mhm.
gather as much information as possible.
Yeah, I think you should go with that. That sounds like a really great idea, because you can kind of like frame that idea as like more of a comprehensive assessment practice for your population of focus. So thinking
Mm,
about that as being, okay, what would we really need to input that? Like we would probably need to train staff to
mhm,
engage with the comprehensive assessment tool.
mhm,
We're probably gonna need time and money and research, because like looking out nationally, sometimes internationally, to look at what do some of these comprehensive risk assessment tools look like,
mhm,
what are really great assessment programs, um like how have they been developed, and like somebody's going to need to research that to be able to kind of support that implementation and creation of those materials needed. So that materials, technology, here's a
mhm,
question I have for you as well, like Are your services all face-to-face, or can people come in online remotely when they need to check in with their case manager?
Um, most of it is face to face because we require drug screening.
Mm-hmm.
So most of it is face to face. Once they phase up to certain phases, then some of it can be telephonic, and then the next session will be like in person. And then they're still subject to drug screenings on demand,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
alcohol and drug screening. So
Yeah. Okay. I was thinking maybe expanding telehealth or, teleservices or something like that, because that's
mm,
nationally shown to be like really good, like improving client engagement, because you're really
yeah,
offering flexible
it does,
service.
and we do that. We do that when they phase into their third and fourth phase because they're only required to come in so often because they've gained that sobriety and that trust within the first um basically 6 months of the program. So we do offer that. It just comes in later on,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
it's just that accountability and determining that they're being sober requires those weekly case management and weekly court as well, where you're subject to drug testing and alcohol testing during that time. And then they have their scram devices for um, utilizing that for alcohol.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so they do
Yeah.
all
Okay. Well, you're right. You are in a very well put
that. Yeah,
together.
well, very well put together program, which I'm not mad about it at all. So it
No,
has
I mean,
a
I
very
never.
good quality rating here for veterans and active duty members, basically not recidivating or anything like that. So
Yeah. Wow. No, that's incredible. I mean, normally the problem of this course is actually the opposite. Like, there's so many needs. I don't know where
yeah,
to narrowly focus. So that's good. But
mm,
I think if you go with that assessment, comprehensive assessment approach, that could really help. And like, you don't need to have all of these inputs. This is just sort of
mm,
you know, a grab bag of things that
yeah.
might be
It's the
possible.
one thing I feel like would be the most beneficial to truly gauge, you know, past trauma, current trauma due to military experience, things like that, so that you have a really good idea on how high risk somebody actually is. Because, I mean, if you gather all that information, it's more beneficial to seeing if they're not being honest about things, where things won't quite line up in between the different risk assessments versus one risk assessment. It really is not very comprehensive at all. It doesn't really go over a whole lot.
Yes. No, I think that's really great. And then thinking about what you could actually increase as well, and like resources, like if you have a better idea or a more comprehensive examination of risk factors, that can actually lead to better
Mhm.
referral systems. Like you could, have you ever heard of the evidence-based practice SBIRT? It's like SBIRT.
I've seen it, but I've not actually looked into it.
It's like a harm reduction approach from public health, but it's used a lot in social work. And it's sort of a similar approach, is that like there's an assessment that happens. Typically it's usually around drugs or alcohol, but I actually think it could be used across many different areas, in the sense of like, if someone's doing great, you just like reinforce their behavior. That's the screening part of it. The brief
Hmm.
intervention happens if somebody shows like a little bit higher risk. Then you do like a very brief intervention where you're like using motivational interviewing and talking about maybe reducing use and like increasing health behaviors. And then if it's like really at risk, or if someone's showing like at risk drinking, or if someone's showing like at risk substance use, you're then referred to treatment. So one of the things to implement this is like, you really do need a strong referral network for this to happen. So that
Hmm.
could also be something you could build up, is like,
Hmm.
okay, if we are going to be assessing for all these different types of risks, before we do that in place in terms of resources, we need to develop a referral network for like, let's say we
Yeah,
do start uncovering certain risks that we have never
I
even
think.
asked about
Yeah,
before.
I think the weakest point in that would be those who were discharged from the military with like other than honorables, because it limits the treatment and the services they can receive from the VA. So most of those that come out from obviously active duty, they are covered by facilities. They have SETC and different facilities and stuff on the installation that will treat active duty. Veterans obviously have the VA, but it dependent on the discharge that they received. So maybe services beyond that can help assist those who don't have the required discharge from the military to receive certain resources from the VA would be an area.
Yes, no, that would be really good, because there's got to be, you know, I'm thinking of like, you know, you're assessing for a suicidal ideation. Like I know the VA has like really great services around that, but let's say you uncover something like eating disorder or something that there might not be, like an eating disorder clinic. I don't know. I'm making this up.
Yeah, those are hard to find too. Yeah,
Right. So like trying,
they're expensive.
yes, in terms of like thinking it through in terms of like what could all the risks be, and potentially, and you don't have to do this, Lindsay, it's just like an imaginative process at this point, because you're just proposing. Like a part of your activities could be developing a larger referral network outside of the VA for services not covered comprehensively, even though, you know, there are so many services available, it sounds like.
Yeah, there are a lot.
Yeah. And then, you know, for participation, who you want to reach is really, you know, you want to reach participants, you potentially want to reach agencies if you are like developing some referral networks. And then obviously workers too. You want to onboard your workers to this new assessment and like train them for the assessment. And then like short term, it's probably like you're obviously increasing the capacity of the organization to understand broader risks, but then you're also increasing your referral network and kind of understanding, you're increasing knowledge of gaps in services. And you know, knowledge and awareness, like you're probably like, even the experience of going through a comprehensive risk assessment or assessment in general sometimes is enlightening for clients, because you're like, well, I never even thought about maybe my behavior in that area is a little bit harmful, you know, like we all have those things, right? Or wow, maybe I scored higher on that depression screening than I ever imagined I would, you know, like you're also increasing clients' awareness about their own risk. So that could fall in the short term. And then the ultimate impacts, I mean, you're kind of hitting a lot of these because of the population you're working with. So like improved health of veterans impacts social, economic, civic, and the environment of like our country in many ways, you know?
Okay.
So I think if you just take that one thing, like that comprehensive assessment program, you could call it, or service, you could really work that through the logic model.
Okay. I think that helps a lot.
Good. Okay. We have about 10 more minutes. Sharita or Lindsay, do you have any remaining questions at all?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. How about you, Sharita?
I do not.
Okay, well, you all have been wonderful. I hope this is helpful, and I'm recording this in case you know, your classmates who can't be here. I'm trying to find different times to offer this. I offered one in the morning. This is like midday, and I think for our program evaluation, I'll try to offer it at night, just to try to hit different student groups and time zones and everything like that. But if you don't mind, I'd like to post this just in case your classmates need some support and like can tune into this, if that's okay.
Oh, for sure. That's fine. Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
All right. thank you both so much for visiting with me today.
Thank you.
All right, I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye.